You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. A lot of exciting stuff today. For one thing, we enter the world of girls with an expert on how to fight sexism for small female people. Then we touch on a new website that you will want to know about. It's going to be the go-to place for feminism. Historical, present, and fun. And last but hardly least, the final insult and outrage of slavery has been the historical burying of the leadership of enslaved people in the fight against slavery. They've been sort of erased historically, and we're going to talk with the author of a book that places them back front and center. It's very exciting. But first we need to go inside the headlines. We know by now that women running for public office have a high mountain to climb, and that they have to do it backward and in high heels to boot. But once you've won, there's no feeling completely secure either, because the attacks keep coming. Interestingly, across Latin America, which has an impressive record, Latin and South America, of women national leaders, but all across the region, they're falling like ninepins. In Argentina, former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner has been indicted and accused of having endangered the nation's finances. In Brazil, there's the President Dilma Rousseff's impeachment problems. And in Chile, President Michelle Bachelet, who was once enormously popular, has had her approval ratings plunge. This is all over corruption scandals. Kirchner took over in 2007 from her husband, Nestor. And then, of course, before her, in Argentina, there was Eva Perón setting that template. But Rousseff, too, was the handpicked successor of her mentor, a man, Luis Inácio Luis da Silva. Now, all of these men have been accused in one way or another of corruption, too. So it's interesting that the women leaders, as one scholar of gender politics in elections pointed out, the women leaders are getting all of the backlash for the corruption of men. That was said by Farida Jalalzi, a professor of gender politics at Oklahoma State. She added, it would be surprising if there were no gender dynamics behind this. In other words, even if the women have been corrupt, there's an additional layer of gender politics, which shouldn't surprise us. In the case of Bachelet, it's her daughter-in-law being involved in a corruption scandal that have caused her approval ratings to plummet. But the backlash includes the new men who are ascending to power. In Brazil, for example, the new president appointed his cabinet entirely devoid of women. Feminists have pointed out it's a manifestation of residual macho attitudes, but you can't relax once you're even in office. It, of course, helps not to be corrupt, but the point is that men can get away with it and you can't. Of course, in Iran, gaining a seat in parliament doesn't mean you'll even get to serve, much less the chance to even be corrupt to begin with, because Minot Khalegi, who easily won a seat in the Iranian parliament last February as part of a wave of independents and reformists, she was stopped from serving, citing evidence that had emerged against her. The Dispute Settlement Committee of Branches, a part of Iran's generally conservative judiciary, ruled that she could not be sworn in as a new member of parliament. The evidence, it turns out, consisted of photographs of her that had been so-called leaked on social media, showing her in public in Europe and in China without the obligatory Islamic headscarf. And so she was immediately accused by hardliners of betraying the nation. she fought back. She has pointed out that the photographs are malicious fakes, that she is a Muslim woman adhering to the principles of Islam, and she was suing the distributors of her images because they were driven by political greed and the images have been doctored. She was disqualified without explanation by the powerful Guardian Council, the 12-member group that includes 6 clerics appointed by the country's supreme leader, the Ayatollah. And this was surprising because the council had already screened her extensively before the vote, just as it does all candidates, and it had proclaimed her fit. And it's also alarming because under the Iranian constitution, only the parliament is empowered to review and approve the credentials of new lawmakers. But hey, we know there are always different rules for women. We see it in the campaign here in the United States, and we see it across Latin America and in Iran as well. In the past, you might call it being held to a lower standards when we were patronized and thought unworthy of these jobs. In the more recent past, held to a higher standard. But lower or higher, it certainly is a different standard for women. And it's a double standard. And now for my first guest. Rachel Simmons is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Odd Girl Out, The Hidden Culture of Aggression in Girls, which was later adapted into a Lifetime television movie. And she also wrote The Curse of the Good Girl, Raising Authentic Girls with Courage and Confidence, which also became a bestseller. She's a Rhodes Scholar, a proud women's study major, and she is the co-founder of Girls Leadership, a national nonprofit, which we'll hear more about. Here is Rachel Simmons. Welcome to the program, Rachel.
Thank you.
You're, of course, the author of the New York Times bestseller, Odd Girl Out, The Hidden Culture of Aggression in Girls, and your most recent book is The Curse of the Good Girl, Raising Authentic Girls with Courage and Confidence, which also is a bestseller. And you founded Girls Leadership, which I want to talk about. Let's start with this. This all came about because of you as a girl, didn't it?
It did. I think I had a lot of unresolved issues, whether it was having girls be mean to me or me being a bully to a close friend, or also struggling with the fact that I was very outspoken and took up a lot of space and felt a lot of stigma for that and not really understanding why. So I think a lot of my work has been an effort to resolve and make sense of my own challenges.
Wow. Well, you certainly have done it in a stellar way. I mean, your work seems to me to pick up where Carol Gilligan's research years ago sort of left off when she began to do the research about around the age of, 12, when girls stop being, saying things like, I think and I feel, and start to preface it with, I'm sure I'm wrong, but, or
exactly,
I could be crazy, but, I mean, and the whole culture, the weight of the culture descends on them for quote, girlishness, and how to find or keep their own voices. And that's what your life has now become about. Tell us about Girls Leadership.
Well, Girls Leadership, in many ways, exactly as you say, Robin, began as a response to Gilligan and her colleagues' work, really an attempt to say, okay, well, we know girls are losing their voices. We know that they're disconnecting from their strongest thoughts and feelings. So what do we do? I mean, how do we actually cultivate the skills that they need to talk back to that process? And so that's really what we do. We work with girls in kindergarten through 12th grade, year-round, and in a summer program at Mount Holyoke College, where we are really trying to break down what does resilience look like, what does it mean to speak your mind and to say, this is what I think, instead of, I'm not sure if this is right, but how do you take risks when you feel that you're supposed to be a good girl all the time? And so we're cultivating critical consciousness in some of the older girls, and we're teaching the youngest girls to say, hey, you know what, it's my turn to sit on the swings. Right? And so, but that's all the same muscle group. And the earlier we start, the more likely it is that these girls will become young women and then mature women who can advocate for themselves in every domain of their lives.
Right. What can an individual listener who is has a girl in her life, whether as a parent or an aunt or a whatever, do to when she sees that kind of thing happening? Is there any particular approach that can be taken?
Well, I think the most important thing that adult women can do is just try to live by example.
Model it. In other words,
yeah, you've got to model it, because we script children at every stage of their lives. At the youngest ages, the little kids start cursing when they hear us say bad words, and we go, oh God, they're listening. And then as they get older, they're also listening to how we advocate for ourselves and whether or not we say no. And if someone gives us a compliment, they hear us say, oh no, I don't look that good today. Mm-hmm. So I say to adult women, when someone apologizes to you, say thank you instead of it's okay, unless it really is okay. When someone gives you a compliment, say thank you. Don't put yourself down. When you make a mistake, don't call yourself an idiot in front of a girl, which is such a common kind of female response, to really put yourself down.
Right.
But instead, find a way to balance accountability with self-compassion. And these are the kinds of things that girls need to see adult women doing, and they will mimic us in the best ways.
Yes, that's so important. You gave a really stunning TEDx Women talk on this subject, and you also hosted...
I was so terrified, Robin. I mean, why do those TED Talks make you so scared? I don't understand.
Well, because you have to do it without notes and without, it's a real killer. I mean, I read poetry, and I put my flat little foot down and said, there is no way I'm going to, quote, recite poetry, my own poetry. I have to be able to read it. And to my astonishment, they said, okay. But for
Lucky, I should have done that. But Jane Fonda gave me a hug afterwards, which was like the highlight of my life.
Okay.
So it's okay.
I will tell her.
Okay.
She's a co-founder of the Women's Media Center, along with Gloria and me. But it's a great talk. And you can still find it, listeners, on TED. And you hosted the PBS television special A Girl's Life as well. Is that still around? Can people get that?
Yeah, you should be able to get it at pbs.org, and it was one of the first sort of documentaries to look at cyberbullying in particular and how that was affecting girls. And I think, we're still just beginning to understand some of the differences in how girls and boys use social media, so that's an area that I'm very interested in, continue to be now.
Yes, hugely, because, boys and men seem to feel that the cyber world, which in fact is the world of not only tomorrow but the day after, should be woman free. I mean, it's a public space, and they seem to be rather upset when women stray into it. Much more so if women have something to say. So if you can nip that one in the bud earlier, that would be incredible. That would be fantastic.
I think so, and I think also we're looking at how girls are using platforms like Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat, and how social media can be a site where they can be very politically active, but also where a lot of their insecurities as adolescents can be exacerbated. So, you can learn everything on social media, for better and for worse, all the things that you want to know and all the things you don't want to know.
Right.
And so we're trying to teach girls how to navigate that without kind of losing their self-worth in the process.
Right.
I just gave a talk to some high school girls where I live in Massachusetts, and I was talking to them about how it's so important for them to resist the message that female aggression is funny, that female aggression is sexy, that your attachment to a man matters more than your attachment to each other. In fact, one of the girls said to me, if I have a friend break up with me, like our friendship ends, does that mean we were never friends in the first place?
Oh.
And and she was a high school student, and I paused and I said, the friendships you have with other women are going to be some of the most intimate, powerful relationships you'll have in your life. But it was clear, again, they get such messaging around cat fights and bitchiness.
Oh, of course.
And it's really diminished for them. So I think one of the most important things that particularly high school and middle school girls need to understand is that there's a political side to supporting other women, and to not buying into that stereotype of the catty girl.
That's where the personal is political. I mean, it still is very true. And, you might tell them as well, this won't matter to them, because when you're a teenager or a young person, you think you're going to live forever anyway. But you might add on that female friendships lengthen the life of a woman. Literally.
I do say that. I actually tell the story of a close friend of mine who I betrayed and who I am friendly with today. But I say to those girls, I gave up a precious friendship that I could have had now in my 40s. I say, you think you're going to grow up and be different, but actually you'll just be the same person with a mortgage and paying taxes. You're just going to be the same body. So don't mess it up now.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Oh, you're just terrific, Rachel. Thank you. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for the books Odd Girl Out, The Hidden Culture of Aggression in Girls, which became part of the Lifetime television movie. And thank you for The Curse of the Good Girl, Raising Authentic Girls with Courage and Confidence. Both of them bestsellers, both of them really important books. Thanks for all the work you do, and thanks for being with us.
Thanks for all the work you do, Robin. I appreciate it.
It's time for a pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. But if you've ever wanted, with one click, to go to a place where there was feminism past, present, and probably, for that matter, implications for the future, online, the go-to place, stay tuned for the next segment.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. You know, given the intergenerational and cross-cultural power of feminism, and also given the many continually propagated myths about feminism, think how important it is to have a place where you can actually get the truth. Well, my next guest, Susan Ware, herself a pioneer in the field of women's history and a leading feminist biographer of Amelia Earhart and Molly Dewson and Mary Margaret McBride and Billie Jean King, now the head writer on a project called Click, which you can be a part of and which comes next. It's fabulous. Susan Ware, welcome to the program, Susan.
Well, thank you for having me.
Listeners, full disclosure, this project is so important and appealing that this is the quote that I gave to it. This is me. This fan-frickin-tastic project will prove absolutely invaluable as a source for feminists, women and men in general, scholars in and out of academia, non-scholarly types who are curious humans, and invaluable to the history, the present, and the future. Thank you, Click team. And since you're the head writer, thank you, Susan Ware. My God.
Well, you can imagine how exciting it is for us to finally have it up after quite a few years of work.
Oh, it's extraordinary. First of all, I want to give the website a couple of times. It's www, all one word, Clio History, CLIO history.org/Click. Clio, of course, being the muse of history. And Click, explain Click.
Well, it's the title that I actually came up with, and I'm very proud of it because it has these double meanings. It is, of course, that moment that many of us experienced in the 60s and 70s, that click of recognition that something was wrong in terms of how women were treated, and that's what turned me into a feminist, and it turned many other women into feminists. So it has that historical resonance, but then it's also a term that we use now in our new internet-savvy world where we click on information and click from one site to another, and so it just seemed to capture both the historical aspect of the site, but also that we are very much part of the modern conversation, which is happening on the web.
Well, that's true. And the wit of the contemporary Click combined with the 60s, 70s Click, which I think came out of an article in Ms. Magazine, is indicative of the full name, which is Click, the Ongoing Feminist Revolution, because this site highlights collective action and individual achievements of women from way back to the 1940s to the present. And it's film clips taken from many documentary films, it's extensive interactive timelines, it's in-depth essays and primary documents and photos, and it's just a wealth of information. No wonder this took years.
Well, it took years also because we were we were trying to decide how best to tell a story and also to honor what has been so important to us, which is the history of feminism. And in terms of the subtitle, remember it's got several words, ongoing, because it is ongoing. We wanted to capture that.
Yes.
Feminist, we had to have the word feminist in there. And revolution, it's an unfinished revolution, but it really has been an amazing amount of social change. And so how to capture all of that in a site that could get done in our lifetimes was a real challenge. And I'm really pleased with especially the combination of text and resources and the timelines and the film clips. That's the thing people really should go check. And you can they range in length from, a minute or two to one, I think is close to half an hour. But they really, having that dimension to it, adds so much because you see women talking about their lives and their changes and the changes that have happened and also their role in making those changes. And it's really cool.
Right.
And to be able to do that all in one site it's really one of the advantages of the modern world we live in.
Totally. And it's also a visual culture more and more now. And on top of that, for decades, I was one of many feminists who were worrying that because when we first came to feminism, we were completely ignorant. I made jokes about the suffragists, these funny little old ladies running around in hoop skirts with ear curls on either sides as if they were Hasidic
Shame
Jews.
on you.
Yeah, boy, was I embarrassed when I began to read Elizabeth Cady Stanton and discovered she was more radical than I at the time was. So our history, as with any oppressed people, has been buried. And part of this contemporary wave of feminism, which I don't call the second wave because it's more like the 50,000th. But this contemporary wave has unearthed so much of women's history but you worry that we'll get buried again. And something like Click, particularly using the medium of the internet, and being interactive and being lively is just such an amazing solution to that. And also, I speak a fair amount of the time at colleges and universities, and young women are so hungry for some of their own heritage, their own history. And this is a way, in a medium with which they are familiar, for them to become knowledgeable and equip themselves with the tools that they need.
Yeah, I think certainly younger women are one of our main audiences, and we know that there is a huge amount of feminist sympathy and activism and identification out there, but it isn't always accompanied with a sense of the history of what came before. Your example of not knowing about the suffrage movement when you became active in the 60s. And I think, remember the team that put this together, we're all historians, and we're committed to bringing history and our ability to share it with new generations or people who never had the opportunity to take a women's history class.
That's right.
In school. And so it has that we have this desire to help people understand the history because we believe that knowing the history informs where we are today, but also very much wanting to keep that history in dialogue with all the explosion of new global feminism and the new challenges that younger women are taking on. And so it really is a multi-generational dialogue.
There is, even among younger activists now, an unawareness, and not their fault, because until Click, it hasn't been available in a medium that they really use, an unawareness of what the contemporary wave of feminism beginning in the 60s and 70s really was. So sometimes the idea that feminists also, feminism, sexism, and racism are intimately connected and you can't fight one without the other, they think they've invented, when actually most of the women who began this contemporary wave, white and black, came out of the civil rights movement. So everything that you're doing is really needed.
Well, I wanted to give a shout out to all the feminist history that has been done, which I and everyone else who worked on the website was able to draw on to pull this together. We didn't just do this from scratch. We are standing on the shoulders of several generations of feminist scholarship, and you really see it in the clips from the documentaries.
I hope schools get this. I hope if there are any educators out there, this is a tool that can sing in your hands. And then just for ordinary women and for smart men who want to be on the right side, this is an incredibly fun website to be at, as well as one that will leave you more knowledgeable. Again, let's say the website. It is www.cliohistory, cliohistory.org/click. But I think probably if you simply Google click and feminism, probably it will come up at some point.
It will. And as we say on the homepage, come join us, click, and prepare to have your consciousness raised.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Listen, Susan, thanks for your work on this. Thanks to Lola von Wagenen. Thanks to all the women who made Click possible. And thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. Listeners, go to that website and claim your own history and herstory.
And we have to thank Robin Morgan for being part of the history herself. So thanks again for having me on your show.
And now it's time to pop into the surrealism corner. This is a heavy one, I have to say. So many teenage girls are now seeking cosmetic surgery to trim or shape the external genitalia, their vulva, that the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has issued guidance from its Committee on Adolescent Health Care to doctors last month, urging them to teach and to reassure patients that this procedure is not necessary and can be very dangerous. For adults, the procedure is marketed as vaginal rejuvenation, tightening the inner and outer muscles of the vagina as well as often shaping the labia, and it is geared to older women and women who've given birth. But gynecologists who care for teenage girls say that now they receive requests every week from patients who want surgery to trim their labia minora, mostly for cosmetic reasons. This is just appalling and heartbreaking. The labia have a lot of nerve endings in them, says one doctor, so there could be diminishment of sexual sensation after surgery, or numbness, or pain, or scarring. A 2007 committee report from the American College of OBGYNs said that this report, by the way, was reaffirmed in 2014, and it said that the procedures were not medically indicated, had not been proven safe or effective, and could cause serious complications. But the American Society for Aesthetic Plastic Surgery says that 400 girls 18 and younger had labiaplasty last year, which is an 80% increase from the 220 girls who had cosmetic genital surgery in 2014. A 2013 British report found the number of labial reductions on girls and women done by the National Health Service had increased 5-fold over 10 years. That's a trend. Girls 18 and younger account for less than 2% of all cosmetic operations, but almost 5% of all labioplasties. The most popular cosmetic procedures for teenagers are ear surgery, followed by nose surgery, and breast reductions. When the doctors try to figure out what's driving the trend, they say many young girls shave or wax their pubic hair now, exposing the genital area. According to a 2012 study, more than 70% of girls and young women ages 12 to 20 say they routinely shave or wax the pubic area. These are girls who have come of age with the internet, and they can go online and look up images of the vulva that are airbrushed and look nothing like the wide variety of shape, color, size, and asymmetry in normal human female beings. Dr. Veronica Gomez Lobo, who is president of the North American Society for Pediatric and Adolescent Gynecology, says, I think the most important thing to understand is that there's huge variety in the anatomy. And she recommends young women look at unretouched photographs of vulvas like those in the book Petals. I recommend that if you know any young women who in any way, shape, or form you mentor, or if you are one, you consider what this is doing to your body and to your own sexual pleasure. We have got to mitigate against this. This is a huge leap backward for womankind, and it is decidedly surreal. Time for another quick break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will be back right away with more unburied, for the first time, history. Don't go away. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. Manisha Sinha is professor and graduate program director of Afro-American Studies at the University of Massachusetts. She's currently working on a co-authored History of the South. She was a consultant and on-screen expert for the Emmy-nominated PBS documentary The Abolitionists, which was airing in 2013. And she's here today to talk about her stunning book, newly out, The Slave's Cause, Abolition and the Origins of American Democracy. Dr. Sinha, Manisha, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Well, let me start with kudos and bouquets and balloons and fireworks. This is an extraordinary book. The Slave's Cause, A History of Abolition. The New York Times called it the difficult to imagine a more comprehensive history of the abolitionist movement. It is a biographical dictionary in a sense of all of the players. It examines the tactics, the strategy, the transnational effects, the role of women, and most importantly to me, this reader, the centrality of the enslaved peoples themselves to abolition. You know, when I was growing up, we learned about John Brown, who was, of course, a white guy, but we never learned about Denmark Vesey. We never learned about Toussaint Louverture. It wasn't even until the Civil Rights Movement, and when I was in the Civil Rights Movement, that I learned that there were women abolitionists, black and white. So you have done such a service to history and everything else. Bravissima.
Thank you, Robin. Yes, most historians draw these divisions between slave resistance and anti-slavery activism. And as I was researching and writing this book, I realized that those divisions did not exist. That, in fact, instances of slave rebellion, especially the most spectacular one, the Haitian Revolution,
yes,
which was the establishment of the first Black Republic, the only instance of a successful slave rebellion in world history, that all these events played a very important part in pushing the abolition movement forward. So I argue in this book that slave resistance is what defined the movement, its programs, its tactics, and it is what radicalizes the movement.
And of course, once that's said, it's the nose on our face. I mean, it's obvious. It always starts with the oppressed people themselves. It's not that, in terms of abolition, it wasn't that a couple of principled white people woke up one morning and said, gee, this is a bad thing. Let's do something about this. You pose in this remarkable tome of 700 plus pages and worth every page. You pose the struggle in two waves, which is very interesting to me. The first sort of being basically, roughly speaking, the end of slavery in the North, which of course many people don't even know that there was slavery in the North. The ignorance in the United States is profound. And then the second going through to the Civil War.
Right. I think we forget sometimes that there was this first wave of abolition that involved early black writers, former slaves and thinkers. In fact, the founders of the African Methodist Episcopal denomination, the church that was attacked in Charleston last year, they were former slaves who bought their own freedom and became prominent black abolitionists.
Yes.
So that was a church founded by black abolitionists.
Yes.
And people didn't know that till I pointed that out in a piece that I wrote for the Huffington Post. It is important to look at this early wave of African Americans, of early Quaker abolitionists who really jumpstart the first organized abolition societies. And the ways in which the enslaved, won their freedom. My students in Massachusetts are always amazed when I tell them that slavery was abolished in Massachusetts because two slaves sued their masters for their freedom. And their case went right up to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, which declared that slavery was inconsistent with the state's commitment, the state's constitution's commitment to the Bill of Rights. So it is interesting that we never think of the dramatic roles, in fact, that enslaved people did in winning their freedom. So this first wave ends with, as you mentioned, abolition and in most cases gradual emancipation in other northern states, and also significantly the abolition of the African slave trade in the United States.
Yes, yes. And, in the North where I happen to live, so obviously this was a special interest to me, but the North was also involved in the second wave, as it were, because there not only did there become an alliance between activists who were black and white, with the initiation coming from the black activists, but there was an alliance, of course, of the on the other side, this fascinating Whig Party alliance between, quote, Lords of the Lash and Lords of the Loom, because it was an alliance between Southern planters and Northern factory owners who joined forces against abolition because they didn't want, freedom and liberty as a catching idea to white workers.
Yes, you're making some really important points. The second wave of abolition is very interracial. It is, in fact, led and started in a way by free blacks in the North who realize that the end of slavery is not enough, that one has to fight for black citizenship. And that becomes the program of this new radical interracial movement. Not just the end to Southern slavery, but the end to all racial discrimination. But as you pointed out, they face tremendous odds because slavery is entrenched in the nation's economy. Slave-grown cotton is being exported not only to England, but being sent to textile mills in New England.
Right.
So manufacturers, cotton manufacturers, bankers, shippers, they all tended to be pretty pro-slavery. So when the abolitionists start out, they are what I call passionate outsiders. They don't have access to political power or economic power, for that matter, and they're the ones who sort of begin this movement and are able to confront these Lords of the Loom and Lords of the Lash.
It's so fascinating. It's finally connecting the dots, as well as original scholarship that's just never been done before. Let's talk a bit about women, black and white, in the abolition movement, because finally Harriet Tubman made it into history as the great Moses, and we know about the Grimke sisters, and Gerda Lerner, of course, wrote quite a bit about white activism among women and how that spawned the suffrage movement, just as this time around the civil rights movement spawned the contemporary feminist movement. Talk about some of those women, please.
Yes, that's a really good analogy. You can see the women's rights movement emerge from the abolition movement, just as the way that modern feminism has emerged from the civil rights movement in the 20th century. I realized that the history of abolition was always written piecemeal, so that even though we've had some very good books on women abolitionists, on black abolitionists, they were not integrated into the history of abolition as a whole. And that is what I wanted to do in my book. Garrison called women the best foot soldiers of the abolition movement. They were the ones who kind of led the petition campaign, and this is when they did not have the right to vote.
Yeah.
They were the ones knocking door to door, collecting signatures, and they were the ones who outsigned men in abolitionist petitions by nearly 2-1. So they were very active in the movement, in fundraising, as lecturing agents, etc. And ultimately, of course, their presence in the movement leads to some controversy. There are some who are relatively conservative on the issue of women's rights, and others who just more pragmatically did not want to add another unpopular cause to what they felt they had to sort of confront in terms of fighting for black freedom and equality. So it does lead to a schism in the movement. But interestingly enough, the women, like the Grimke sisters, and even before the Grimke sisters, African-American women abolitionists like Maria Stewart, right here in Boston, when they started speaking out in public, they realized that they had to defend their own right to plead for the slaves' cause, because there was all this opposition to women taking a more prominent and public role in the movement. Now, that as I said, it leads to a schism in the movement. There are people like Garrison, including Frederick Douglass, who felt that women's rights were part of human rights, and that's what they were struggling for. But during Reconstruction, that alliance falls apart because there are some suffragists, mainly associated with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, who feel that that the Reconstruction amendments that was introducing the word male into the U.S. Constitution was betraying the cause of women's rights. And they started out an independent movement. Now, not everyone agreed with them. A lot of black women, a lot of original abolitionist feminists like Lucy Stone, Abby Kelly Foster, felt that the fight for racial equality was more urgent at that time, and that they would continue to fight for women's rights, but that they would not oppose any legislation or amendments that guaranteed black citizenship in this country. So the women's movement divides over this. But the one that becomes independent and the more prominent, the one led by Stanton and Anthony, as I write in the book, they gained something, but they also lost a lot, which was the original abolitionist commitment.
Something in general that amazes me about your book, which is how the patterns, repeat and repeat. And if we do not know our history, we are, in fact, doomed to repeat it, aren't we?
Exactly. I think people forget that a lot of the issues that we deal with today have these long historical antecedents. People ought to realize that these internal battles should not obscure the much larger battle that people have to fight against forces of reaction, of racism, of misogyny, that continues.
Exactly. And the timeliness of this book is so stunning, because you also go into, of course, at great depth, the founding of the Republican Party. My goodness, how far we have come from those days, as an abolitionist party. I mean, so much is in here. I can't praise it enough. Unfortunately, we've got to go. Oh dear. But listeners, the book is called The Slave's Cause, A History of Abolition. The author is Dr. Manisha Sinha, with whom we've been speaking today. It is a brilliant book. You have to have it in any library. You have to teach it. You have to talk to people about it. We need this book. It's life-saving and life-giving. Thank you, Manisha, for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Robin.
It's time for one last break. I'm Robin Morgan. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'll be right back with You Got It, some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again to some fighting words. Was it only 4 years ago when Mitt Romney, running as the GOP candidate for president, referred to looking through binders of women to try to find qualified women? Remember that? Already low with women voters, he plummeted a further 20 points with women and never regained those points. So we can estimate the outrage fueling Donald Trump's more than 70% negatives among women, Republican women included. A bit late on the story, but better late than never, the New York Times did a front-page piece this past week on Trump's behavior in private with women. Although the Times seemed surprised at what they discovered, we aren't. On meeting women for the first time, he kisses them on the lips. Gross, one said. He continually comments on women's appearances, including those of women he has hired ostensibly for their expertise in real estate. He's big on, quote, weekend relationships. He gropes women under the table, including women companions of his male colleagues at the table. Some of the TV pundits backed and forthed about whether this was sufficient to condemn him as sexist. Honest to God. He was already condemned as blatantly sexist from what he has openly said himself and continues to say. He rates women by their body parts. He stated that women should be punished for having had abortions. He says he would like to date his daughter because she's hot. Oh, my God. And then he winds up saying he cherishes women, which we believe as much as the Latino community believes he's their pal because he eats a taco bowl. But Trump's not the only problem. Because, like her or not, although Hillary Rodham Clinton is the only logical, capable, experienced, progressive candidate who can stop Donald Trump's march to the White House, she is currently having to fight on two fronts now. Senator Sanders persists in his dogged fight, which he cannot win, although persisting is his right, but he does so by continuing to attack and smear Hillary, which he said, of course, he would never do. His rhetoric about her being untrustable and dishonest keeps on spewing, no matter how many times the Pulitzer Prize-winning PolitiFact site and other independent fact-checking organizations show that, in fact, Hillary has the highest rate of accurate truth-telling of all the candidates of any party. No matter how many times that gets reproven, Sanders continues with his accusations, which Trump now picks up to brand her as Crooked Hillary. This having to fight on two fronts in terms of campaign funds, energy, travel, staff, and pure time seriously wounds the fight to come, the fight against Donald Trump. No wonder Trump is urging Sanders to run as an independent and siphon votes away from HRC. Then there are the Sanders followers, whom nobody wants to offend in hopes that we will all come together and fight Trump together in the fall. The Sanders followers, many of whom are voting for the first time, are a lively, impassioned bunch. But some of them, the Bernie bros in particular, Bernie brothers, bros for short, seem to have adopted the tactics of Trump audiences. That's those would-be stormtroopers at his rallies. You may recall that Clinton won Nevada in February with 53% of the vote and netted 20 delegates, as compared with Sanders getting 15 delegates. This apparently was not good enough for the Sanders bros, who a few days ago turned the Nevada State Democratic Party convention into utter chaos. 58 of the Sanders guys had neglected to register as Democrats, as required, yet they demanded entry and voting rights anyway, and they screamed fraud when that was denied. Apparently positive that the rules don't apply to them, they then continually disrupted the convention, even unto booing one of the guest speakers, California Senator Barbara Boxer, off the stage. Now, who doesn't like Barbara Boxer? She has been a brilliant senator, a staunch progressive, and she's simply a genuinely nice person. Her mistake was being for Hillary. There were speakers who spoke for Bernie, too, But only she was booed off the stage with foul language, despite her repeated attempts to reason with the Sanders people. The disruptors made it impossible for the convention to proceed, shouting epithets, chanting, even throwing chairs around until police closed the convention down. This was followed by a Bernie Bros graffiti attack against the state Democratic Party headquarters and a harassment campaign against Nevada Democratic Party chairwoman Roberta Lang, which consisted of thousands of phone calls and as many as 3 text messages per minute, with messages personal and threatening to her and her family. One said her life would become hell now. Another said she should be hung in a public execution. Lang, expressing fear for her kids, has gone into temporary hiding. Now, the same trolling took place in Colorado last month when Trump supporters bombarded the chair of the state Republican Party there with complaints that they were being disenfranchised. Are Trumpites and Bernie Bros now interchangeable? Worse, Sanders did not denounce this behavior himself. He sent a spokesman to say he didn't condone violence, but, quote, the senator believes it would behoove the party to be more welcoming and engage these people, close quote. What? If they don't even register as Democrats for, I don't know, a Democratic convention? Talk about sending a message that gives permission to act out. I'm beginning to feel that if there are Sanders supporters who actually would stay home if he's not the standard bearer, who actually would not turn up to vote to defeat the fascistic, psychotic demagogue that is Donald Trump, if there are Sanders supporters so insanely apolitical and reactionary that it's more important for them to feel pure and to defeat a qualified candidate who is a progressive than it is for them to act as progressives themselves, I'm beginning to feel that this withholding continually of any criticism of their tactics is to no purpose anyway. Look, I still have a fondness for civility in political arguments. I confess that sometimes it's a bit challenged. For instance, Susan Sarandon, a fine actor, has now followed her notoriously strong support for Ralph Nader in previous elections with current intense support for Sanders. This, of course, is her right, and I will defend that, although her support in the year 2000 helped to defeat Gore in Florida by Nader siphoning off the mere 200 votes by which Gore lost. People tend to forget that. I don't. We got George Bush. Now her support is helping to prolong a situation in which the most viable progressive candidate is being double-teamed. But here's where my civility gets really chafed. It's when Sarandon says publicly, and I'm quoting exactly here, "For me, gender is not what's important. Issues are what's important." Close quote. I want to snarl at her that more than half the population of this country are women. And guess what? Half the population of the human species, too. And we have, issues. I want to add that Thelma and Louise, which made her career, enjoyed its success because of the throngs of women flocking to see a reflection of our rebellion on screen. Of course, Sarandon also said that if Trump did win, it wouldn't be that bad, because then the people like the masses, would rise up and the revolution would really happen. This, by the way, was the strategy proposed by the communists in Germany between the 2 world wars. Hey, let the Nazis win, because then things'll get so bad that the people will rise up. That strategy turned out well, don't you think? Even the Sanders campaign made Sarandon walk that one back. So it occurred to me that maybe our tweet of the week should be to Susan, simply at Susan Sarandon, and also at WMC Live, and just ask her, politely, why for her gender is not important, why she doesn't consider that an issue, and what part of freedom and truth and fairness and civil rights, oh yes, and WOMEN, she doesn't understand. I don't think we'll change her mind, but at least this might help her understand that she cannot make such an implicitly bigoted statement without it being challenged. At Susan Sarandon, at WMC Live. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com. There you can find the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. And we're at iTunes worldwide. There you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Regina K. Scully is our founding sponsor. Julie Burton, Women's Media Center President, is executive producer. And I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.